It's not often that the hardest of hardcore Jerry Goldsmith fans ever come across one of his titles and are forced to admit, I never heard of that one before, but that's precisely what happened to Ted the Soundtrack Guy on this particular title. What is this title? It is the soundtrack to the 1973 Private Eye crime drama for Jerry Goldsmith's Shamus. Believe me, this soundtrack has arrived on the scene to shame us, because I know I'm not alone when I admit that this one had slipped under my personal radar, and it was a revelation when Entrada released it in 2021. But this is one funky, light-hearted entry in Goldsmith's brilliant and expansive catalog that's worth checking out. I'm Ted the Soundtrack Guy. Stick with me until the end of this video. Speaking of rare Jerry Goldsmith treasures, you won't want to miss what I have to say about his exceedingly rare music that he wrote for an early television anthology hosted by Ronald Reagan. As much fun as it was to lovingly chide Jerry Goldsmith fans about the title to today's soundtrack, Shamus has nothing to do with shaming us for not knowing anything about this music. Shamus actually means detective in American slang, and the film concerns low-rent private eye Shamus McCoy, played by Burt Reynolds, and is given the task of recovering some stolen diamonds. Now, this is considered not exactly fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, and the audience isn't a whole lot more excited about it than the critics were, but Goldsmith is as fresh as ever. Previously, Jerry Goldsmith had worked with Shamus director Buzz Kulik on Warning Shot, Crawl Space, and the Emmy-awarded score for the sensitive music that Jerry Goldsmith wrote for 1975's TV movie Babe. Now, the cool thing about Crawl Space is that the great Lee Phillips has produced his fourth Jerry Goldsmith anthology Kickstarter project to re-record the music for Pursuit, Crawl Space, and The People Next Door. And of course, rabid Jerry Goldsmith fans came through again in spades, and that project has been completed, and certainly those of us who contributed are now in possession of either our digital copies or the copies themselves of those CDs. But as far as the movie Shamus is concerned, for me, this is very much a lazy Saturday afternoon with a beer kind of flick. I had a lot of fun watching it, but it's not necessarily top-tier cinematic material as far as I'm concerned either. It kind of reminded me of a Travis McGee story, something that John D. MacDonald might have written, but slightly less coherent. But this movie does actually have a number of things going for it. Burt Reynolds gives us a very casual and charming performance as the Private Eye, and all of the performances actually are particularly strong, I thought. But other than the score itself, which of course is exemplary, we're talking about Jerry Goldsmith here after all, the other thing that really stood out to me that was noteworthy in this movie was the sense of place. New York City is very, very tangible and very, very gritty. There are no green screens going on here. We are right in the midst of the atmosphere and the texture of our surroundings. You could really almost feel it right under your fingernails. And I think it helped too that Burt Reynolds himself pulled off all his own stunts. It kind of added this extra layer of authenticity and grit to this movie. But let's talk a little bit about this particular album release, shall we? For the soundtrack to Shamus. This is the 2021 world premiere release. Thank you, Entrada Records. This is a pretty brief soundtrack. There are 11 tracks total on the album, and it comes in at just under 26 minutes runtime. But this is a fun listen. Don't let that dissuade you. It's worth every penny. We've got informative liner notes by Scott Betancourt, which for a little-known project such as this are especially needed to enhance Jerry Goldsmith's intent when it comes to the music that he wrote for this film. There's another section in this booklet from CD producer Douglas Fake. We've got another classic tech talk from the great Douglas Fake here. Now, again, this is a sparse score, and it's actually in the tradition of Von Ryan's Express and Patton, Chinatown. and Escape from Planet of the Apes, in terms of its brevity, most of the film goes unscored, and there's even a section of this film that runs for 33 minutes, devoid of music entirely. Now, that's not unusual for Jerry Goldsmith to show this kind of restraint, but this soundtrack is particularly brief, but in my estimation, its brevity gives it the ability to shine at its strong points that much more brightly. For a recording as old as this one, the sound quality is actually quite exemplary. It's really a fun listen all around. Get yourself a copy if you can. This one's sold out at Entrada Records, and this is my day for admitting shameful things. Ted, the soundtrack guy, missed this one. I expected Entrada Records to keep this one in stock a little longer than it did, but apparently after it had sold out its first run, they decided not to press another batch. So I actually had to scrounge around and find this one in an aftermarket environment, and boy, I'm glad I did. This soundtrack is just full of very twangy, funky sounding music. It's very much like Our Man Flint and In Like Flint, and also Escape from the Planet of the Apes, as already mentioned. But it's not all lighthearted. We've got also some very exciting and even menacing sounding action cues in this soundtrack too. And speaking of particular cues, Ted, do you have any favorite tracks in this particular soundtrack album? Don't I always? Perhaps unsurprisingly, the first track that I think is worth mentioning is track 1 on the album, Main Title. This is one of the longer cues at about 4 minutes, and it involves the scene where Shamus McCoy is introduced as the detective, and he wakes up and he's got a hangover and he's puttering around his one-room apartment, and the music is dryly amusing. It's got this jazzy melody on gentle piano with this light percussion, Fender bass, and soft organ. It's rather simplistic and breezy and charming, but also quite melodic, and this music is Detective Shamus's very own theme, and it's heard not only at the outset of this film, but in various guises throughout the course of the film and its soundtrack. And in terms of the rendition that's in the main titles, it kind of starts off with this, I think it's the triangle or something, or maybe the cymbal just kind of hit sort of rhythm, and the piano comes in very gently, and it's this bum 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 bum. Other notable appearances of Shamus's main theme are in track 2 and track 4, A Real Dog Number 1 and A Real Dog Number 2. Now, in A Real Dog Number 2, the theme is actually particularly funky and grungy sounding. It's again that texture of New York City that I was talking about, the grit right under your fingernails. Jerry Goldsmith has your senses in this cue, and you can smell the exhaust fumes from the cars and maybe the garbage in alleyways. Continuing on with variations of this wonderful main theme for McCoy, we get a gentler version of his theme, which is heard during the love scenes between him and Alexis. Tracks 7 and 8 are 2-part tracks, Getting Acquainted Part 1 and Getting Acquainted Part 2, and these tracks illustrates McCoy's vulnerability and also his genuine interest in Alexis, although he's quite a womanizer and we might not necessarily have expected him to want to settle down with anybody, but he's found in Alexis something that he wants to keep, something very special, and it's heard in this music, and it gives a nice dimension to McCoy's character, makes him a lot more human than he might otherwise be. There's gentle charm in these tracks with harp and guitar and a 70s underwater keyboard kind of sound that reminds me a lot of what Lalo Schifrin did in his soundtrack for the Hellstrom Chronicles. And of course, he's not the only example here. There are plenty of composers during the 1970s that employed this particular underwater electronic keyboard effect. but that certainly is a soundtrack that comes to mind where it is on full display in portions of it. And the fun doesn't stop there. For these love sequences, Jerry Goldsmith also employs a synthesized kazoo kind of sound, which is very traditional of Jerry Goldsmith to be inventive and come up with sounds that might otherwise be totally out of place. But Jerry Goldsmith handles these unique instruments with just as much expertise as he would any traditional sounding instrument. It adds a lot of 70s flair and a lot of 70s slick and cool fun, funky fun, to this already gnarly score. In terms of dynamic writing, track 3 on this soundtrack, titled The Warehouse, definitely comes in as a spotlight track. It starts again with McCoy's theme. There's a lightheartedness to it, of course, as is always the case with McCoy's theme. But here we have these heavy, low register piano keys that give it kind of a business is underway edge. And as this develops, it quickly becomes a suspenseful track, and then a downright sinister sounding track. And Goldsmith continues to build the tension in the strings until McCoy finds the corpse of the flamethrower killer, at which point Jerry Goldsmith melts his music into this moaning kind of musical effect. Tracks 5 and 6, Here I Come 1 and Here I Come 2, turn your stereo up, my friends. These are some notable action cues in this particular album. Jerry Goldsmith goes all out with his funky 70s self here, and it starts off with this percussion. And it's just like Burt Reynolds is out the warehouse window doing his own stunts, and the villains are in hot pursuit. We've got gunfire, and we've got death-defying leaps, and a car chase is underway as Reynolds is fleeing on foot. It's a wonderful sequence of action music from Jerry Goldsmith in this album. And this really is the hub of the excitement in this soundtrack. They're two great action cues, replete with danger and excitement, and it's absolutely thrilling. And of course, again, we have the unmistakable Goldsmith rhythms, as I mentioned, the percussion it starts out with, and it continues on with that incredible percussion throughout both of these tracks. There's the electric guitar present, the organ, and a Goldsmith highlight. I love that he does this in some of his hard, driving, rhythmic, thrilling cues. He also has these soaring strings just singing above this cool percussion. It's such a wonderful blending of melody and chase action writing. In track 10, A Broken Limb, the action and intrigue continues in the music that Jerry Goldsmith offers for the grand finale to this film. It continues in its super slick style, its too cool style, with its echoing electronic guitar and almost this ray gun electronic effect, as well as electronic bass sort of boing drum sounds that remind me very much of the bassy, boingy drum sounds that he employed in the wonderful score for Not Without My Daughter. The finale to this film had me kind of chuckling in myself because I couldn't help but wondering if Steven Spielberg, of all people, and George Lucas perhaps didn't take some inspiration from this ending sequence to the film, because I thought, as Burt Reynolds is driving the military truck in this chase, I thought, boy, some of these shots and some of the storyboarding that I'm seeing here is very reminiscent to a lot of the storyboarding that was present in the classic scene of Raiders of the Lost Ark during the desert chase sequence when Harrison Ford is trying to repossess the Ark of the Covenant from the Nazis. It's a really cool moment in this particular movie, Shamus. And then it also struck me that I read somewhere that Steven Spielberg and George Lucas were considering Burt Reynolds to play the role of Indiana Jones before it ultimately went to, of course, Harrison Ford. There must just be something about really strong and suave and dashing and daring men that inspire certain composers to write really great music, because not only do we have Jerry Goldsmith in top form here in Shamus during this sequence, in Raiders of the Lost Ark, of course, Desert Chase, that track, oh boy, just hold on to your seats. Ted the Soundtrack Guy is going to be covering that one in a future video. It is one of the greatest pieces of music ever written, and due to its brevity, we've pretty much already wrapped it up as far as I'm concerned. But again, this is a special soundtrack, and it's particularly noteworthy because in this brief segment of time, just under 26 minutes, Jerry Goldsmith gives us an astonishing variety of style and colors, and there's all kinds of dimension to it. The emotional range here is quite astonishing, and it ends in track 11, the track titled Stay in My Life, on a particularly poignant and sensitive cue, and does a very fine job anchoring this story in the humanity of the characters involved. Now, as promised, I'm going to deliver on another little-known batch of Jerry Goldsmith music from an early television anthology series. Click right here to watch that video right now. You're going to be astonished at what you're going to hear. Jerry Goldsmith was at the top of his game from the earliest days. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time. And in the meantime, happy listening.